Senator Collins, you have the call.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. On the 18th of August, I was honoured with the opportunity to represent the Coalition at Vietnam Veterans Day Remembrance Service alongside dignitaries and retired Vietnam War servicemen and women. It is always deeply sombre and moving to reflect on the efforts and sacrifices of our fallen veterans. The Vietnam War is one whose raw emotion is still fresh in our memories. The 18th of August also marks the anniversary of the Battle of Long Tan, a brutal and bloody conflict fought during heavy rain in 1966. On that day, 108 Australian and New Zealand soldiers fought a battle against a formidable bastion of North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers. The battle took place in the thick of vegetation of a rubber plantation near the small village of Long Tan. 17 brave and courageous soldiers were killed and 25 were wounded from the 6th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment during this clash with 2,000 Viet Cong soldiers. Joining America's offensive against communist-controlled North Vietnam, Australia sent its first troops to Vietnam in 1962. Our troop numbers increased over a 10-year period that saw more than 58,000 serving in the conflict by the end of the war. 521 of our veterans died in battle and 3,000 were wounded. One of those Vietnam veterans who served was our former Deputy Prime Minister, Tim Fischer AC, 1946 to 2019, an outstanding Australian who served his country with distinction in both war and peace. Other members of Parliament from both sides of politics who served in Vietnam included Graham Edwards, Rod Atkinson, John Bradfield, Kevin Newman and Peter White. To be sure, the Vietnam War was one of our more contested conflicts and it polarised millions. Yet politics aside, the Australian diggers who enlisted were true servants of their country and brave soldiers fulfilling a duty to their country. Australia's forces believed they were fighting for a just cause, to defend freedom and democracy from communist aggression in the region. In this spirit, they were gallant and noble heroes whose service to our country must always be honoured. I salute their sacrifice. Shamefully, many of our Vietnam veterans were treated appallingly on their return to Australia. Some were spat on in the streets and others were shamed and shunned. Many felt abandoned, unappreciated and rejected, leading to lasting emotional scars, depression and addiction. Any Australian who puts their life on the line to serve their country in uniform should never be treated this way. Thankfully, with the passage of time, the community has come to appreciate the service and sacrifice of our Vietnam veterans. The first real opportunity for the Australian public to thank our veterans came in October 1987 with the staging of the Vietnam Forces Welcome Home Parade. Following a dawn service in Martin Place, 22,000 veterans marched through the streets of Sydney where they were saluted by a grateful public. Our then Prime Minister Bob Hawke acknowledged the parade as the culmination of a long process of reconciliation and community acceptance. Marking the 40th anniversary of the Battle of Long Tan, almost 20 years later, in 2006, our then Prime Minister John Howard acknowledged that the healing journey was ongoing. He said, "The sad fact is that those who served in Vietnam were not welcomed back as they should have been. The nation collectively failed those men. They are owed our apologies and our regrets for that failure. The very least that we can do on this 40th anniversary is to acknowledge that fact and to acknowledge the difficulties that so many of them have had in coping with the post-war trauma and to acknowledge the magnificent contribution that they have continued to make to our nation." It has been truly gratifying to see national leaders and organisations like the Return Services League issuing apologies and making efforts to provide better support for our veterans. This is why we as a nation should care for our veteran war heroes and ensure they receive proper treatment and support from the Commonwealth. Thank you to all the Vietnam veterans for your service, lest we forget.